Julia has this amazing way of working with artists and helping you discover how etching can work for you. She has a sixth sense about when to disappear and even leave the room and leave you to yourself, and when to ask leading questions and push you a little bit. And she does it in just the most beautiful way. My whole way of working is, Julia calls it one shot. So I have an idea. My ideas are more about how I'm going to make something and not so much about what it's going to look like. And so I have a process in mind, I carry it out, I see what that leads to, and invariably it doesn't look like what I thought it was going to. So it gives me new ideas about what I want to do next, but I almost never go back into that first attempt. And instead, I take what I learned from it, and start anew. So each piece is one shot. And this is so completely opposite to the way printmaking works, and maybe etching in particular, that it's expected that you build up an image in multiple stages and multiple iterations. So you do a little bit and you see what that looks like, and you add a little bit more. So it's such a different way of working, because it's not the way that I work. Like yesterday, when you asked me, so okay, if this was your final plate, what would you do next? What would your next step be with it? And I sort of don't even know how to answer that question, because it's not a question that I ever ask myself in my studio. In my studio, I say, oh, well, what would I do differently next time on a whole new piece? I'm never asking myself, what would I do to improve this one? So I think it's making me realize a big void in my experience. I mean, I can think 30 years back to art school. Of course, I went through that process in art school, but over time, I've kind of left that behind and evolved this very specific way of thinking about my process and how to achieve the results I want. And so it's uncomfortable. It's pushing me to think about another whole possibility that I have forgotten about, or not forgotten about, but just set aside for decades. Okay. Just about everything that I'm doing lately has a lot to do with rhythm. And I've been participating for years, occasionally, in a rhythm practice that's called Diakité. And it involves a group of people, a drummer, a leader. There's multiple layers of rhythm being built up simultaneously, a stepping, a clapping, a chanting, rhythms that are different from each other. And so when you try and do them all at once, your body starts to get the idea, but if you think about it too hard, you fall out of rhythm and you have to find your way back in. I think professional musicians use this as a way of getting practice at recovering from making a mistake. It's like you have to sort of learn how to operate in that moment where you're lost. For me, I take I rigged up a wearable drawing board so that I can be stepping with all the other participants and drawing at the same time. And I draw while they're clapping. Every time they clap, I strike the drawing. And so now I'm beginning to do that same thing with etching. It's giving me some very particular marks that I'm really excited about. Diakité is a rhythm practice that was developed by a man in Germany who studied all kinds of world percussion practices and integrated them into this method. And the Diakité are syllables that are part of the chanting. And so you might see me in the studio today. I'm going to be using a rhythm that uses the syllables ga, ma, la, ga, ma, la, ga, ma, la. And then it switches from ga, ma, la to Diakité. And it's a way of switching from a count of 3 to a count of 4, and sort of layering 3 against 4. It's mysterious to me too. Yeah, because I'm not a trained leader. I'm simply a participant, and I'm not a musician. So I'm kind of that oddball in these groups. I'm really that oddball in these groups because you've seen I now have developed those crazy fingertip drawing tools to allow me to make these marks on the copper plate. I mean, that was probably one of the biggest lasting developments from my first residency, was realizing, I came sort of with the challenge for you: how do I make marks on a copper plate with all 10 fingers? And all 10 fingers, especially the pinky, they don't have the strength that your single hand with the stylus has. So we had a hard time figuring. I thought it was going to be easy, but I thought we were just going to tape a nail to my finger. But it just doesn't quite work that way. And I left that residency with a vision of the tools, the fingertip drawing tools that I really wanted. And I went and studied metalworking for 2 years with a bunch of sweet women making jewelry, and I was making these crazy fingertip claws.
Look like weapons.
They're scary.
Yes.
So now I have these amazing tools that allow me to do what I was hoping to do. This particular program combines 2 really effective and important things. So it gets me out of my home life studio, all the craziness of daily life. And it gets me out of my comfort zone in terms of the materials and medium I'm working with. So it gets me out of my rut and creates this sort of magical moment of experimentation and possibility. Yeah. And so in addition, I think it's just a super important validation for an artist to be given time and space and expertise. That's really different from claiming those things for yourself. To have someone else recognize you and give you these opportunities is it's a big boost. There's a lot of doubt and uncertainty alone in the studio, and it's important to get that validation from outside.